Hey, what's up everybody? I'm standing in front of what used to be a thriving small independent business that closed their doors in June. There's a sign on their door that says out of business, will not reopen. And there's tons of businesses in New Hampshire that have closed their doors. The governor's orders starting in March, where he deemed some people non-essential, it's just devastated small businesses in New Hampshire, and I think we've only begun to see the devastation and the impact that these draconian, unconstitutional, immoral orders have had. But I'm here to give you guys hope. I'm here to be the first kid that points out and says, the emperor's wearing no clothes. The governor is wearing no clothes. And if enough of you out there, you also stand up and point out that our governor's wearing no clothes, we can bring this nonsense to an end. We can bring this madness to an end. We can save our small businesses. We can help our small businesses. It only takes a few people standing up, maybe a dozen businesses in this state, 2 dozen at the most, if they would stand up and fight against this. I know it's hard, I know it's scary, I know it can feel hopeless and feel like you're all alone and you have the oppressive state coming down on you like a big bully. They're not going after big corporations. They're not going after these gigantic companies. The only people they find so far, 9 as far as I can tell, is small independent businesses, the backbone in New Hampshire. They're coming in like schoolyard bullies and oppressing you, and it can feel like the weight of the state is bearing on you and you're all alone and there's nothing you can do. But like I said, the emperor has no clothes on.
And I think that that's what the state is confronting now with these fines. They're issuing these fines thinking these business owners will just comply, pay it, and that'll set an example for other business owners that are not complying with the guidelines. But all you need is one person to challenge it, and that's going to just upends the system. And I think that's going to start exposing the weaknesses and flaws in what the state is doing with trying to enforce these measures in a space where they really haven't thought through how to do this.
Now that excerpt I just showed you, that's an interview I did with Robert Foho. He's a brave attorney and he's representing some courageous people in this state who are fighting back against the governor. And in this interview, keep watching this video. In this interview, we go into what should you do if the police call you because people have reported you, like anonymous snitches. What should you do if the health department or the attorney general calls you? Mask mandates. Do you have to enforce them? Do you have to make customers wear them? Do you have to make your employees wear them? What should you do? What should you do when the government comes poking around trying to mandate these so-called orders from the governor? We get into all this. It's a great interview. Please watch it. And if you're seeing this, please, if you don't like this nonsense that's going on and you want to do your part to help bring it to an end, I ask you to share this video, like this video. I'm going to have this on many social media platforms. Go to levidunn.com. I'll have a link in the description. I'll have the link in my bio. Go there and I'll have a link to videos on all the platforms I'm going to have it on. Get this video in the hands of as many small businesses as you can in New Hampshire. We can still fight this. We can save businesses in New Hampshire. It only takes a few of us standing up. You don't have any other options. If you do not fight back, this is going to be your fate. Your life, your livelihood, your dreams crushed, done away with. All those years of hard work coming to an end. You don't have a choice. You can either let that happen to you or you can fight back and we can put an end to this. So please share this video, message every small business owner you know of that you do business with and get this video in their hands so that we can bring an end to this madness. It only take a few people standing up and it'll go away.
Alright, everything's on, so you were good to go. However you want to.
Awesome. I appreciate you joining me, Robert. Quick little thing why we're doing this today. I've been meaning to do this for a while. It's been on the back of my mind. I thought I'd probably put it off till next year, starting a series of interviewing people who I think embody or help promote freedom in New Hampshire. 8-9 years ago, I picked New Hampshire to move to all 50 states, and a big reason why was the liberties here, and I think it's one of the more freer states. And the live free or die, death is not the lesser of two evils. Especially the second part of that quote, I really like. It's my own moral and ethics philosophy is important to me, and one of the reasons I picked New Hampshire. But there's things that I saw recently that made me, instead of putting this off till sometime next year, interviewing people, I said, right, I got to meet someone right now. And the things that I saw were, starting last month, first time that I'm aware of, the Attorney General in the state and maybe any level of government, started fining businesses for violating any aspect of any orders that have come into play this year because of this pandemic or the lockdowns. So I saw that happen. As far as I can tell, 9 businesses so far. Maybe there's more. But then a few days after that, I was in a local business that I've frequented hundreds of times in the last 8 years. And all the workers are wearing masks for the first time, and the people flipping food by a hot grill. It can be negative 25 in the winter, and they're wearing shorts and a t-shirt, so hot. And I'm like, oh, these poor miserable people wearing masks. Another customer noticed and said, oh, you're all wearing masks now. And the owner said, yeah, we got a bunch of calls from the cops. They kept calling us, and they're like, can you please just comply with the orders so people quit pestering us? I found that interesting. Like, if these are laws or orders, why are the cops pleading with this business to just go along instead of showing up and writing a ticket or fining them? But then I went to another business, and this owner informed me, hey, we got anonymously snitched on by someone in the community they called the health department. And then I said, oh, are you going to talk to an attorney? I'd do that before you just let him in. He's like, oh, no, I'm going to let him in. I don't want to piss him off. And then I got to thinking about all this. And I think a lot of people in general don't know their rights. And businesses in this environment probably don't know what to do. So I said, you know what, I've had a long time wanting to talk to people. I don't know what I'll call this show if I go somewhere with it, or these podcasts or whatever it's going to be, but I know I saw your name, Robert Foho, in the news a handful of times for representing people who are trying to fight back against some of this stuff. So I wanted to have you on.
I appreciate it. My pleasure.
And before we get into that, I was just wondering if we spend a few minutes, if you could give us a little background about yourself. If you're from New Hampshire, if you're not, just where you grew up and how you came to New Hampshire.
Sure. I was born in Miami, Florida. My parents are Cuban immigrants. They fled the Castro communist regime in the mid-1960s. So they have a lot of perspective when it comes to the current climate concerning many of these state governments' mitigation measures that they have imposed in response to the coronavirus. I was born and raised in Miami. I attended University of Miami for my bachelor's degree. I then went to Harvard Law School. I moved back there. I began working there. I eventually moved up to New Hampshire. That's where my kid's mother is from. So we moved up here for personal reasons. Since then, I have been living and working here for about 10 years. I used to work for larger firms, and then I started my own firm 7 years ago. And I've been doing that since. My practice focuses mostly on business litigation. I'm basically a trial attorney. And then I have developed a portion of my practice to civil rights work, which is where a lot of the work that you have seen that I've been engaged in is contained.
And what made you decide to get into law or go to law school, or what piqued your interest in that?
Well, when I was a kid, my dad, he used to tell me 2 things. One is, don't ever let anyone tell you you can't do something. And 2, never underestimate or never take for granted the freedom that you have, because it can vanish in an instant. And that's what my parents observed very quickly happen in Cuba in the 1960s when Castro took over, 1959. He quickly nationalized businesses, appropriated private property. He appointed himself and many of his revolutionary cronies into positions of government without any elections whatsoever. So anyone with half a brain in Cuba quickly recognized what was happening, and my parents left with their parents in the mid-1960s. So, Ronald Reagan once famously said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And that's true. It's always under assault. So I went to law school because I wanted to truly understand what our system of government is all about, how it came to be, and how our laws are supposed to work. Our country is founded on a truly unique and revolutionary idea that really had never been implemented in human history when it was done, and that is that our rights are derived from God or from nature, however you want to put it, not from government. Government does not create our rights. We instead cede some of those rights and create government in order to protect the rights that we have. So when a lot of this started happening, all these lockdowns, all these mitigation measures, what a lot of these government officials fail to understand is that they're not our rulers. They're not kings, queens, what have you. They exist as our servants. We put them in office. in order to protect us. They're not there to rule us and tell us what to do. The people of New Hampshire, really the people in every state in this country, we govern ourselves. That's how it's supposed to be done. That's how our Republican form of government is premised on. They are not there to dictate to us what we should do in our everyday lives. So I went to study the law because I wanted to understand how all that works. And there's a lot of very rich and unique history when you study the legal system that helped me understand that and helped educate me and really appreciate what it is.
Yeah, this whole last 9 months, or how long it's been, got me thinking about America, the rich history of this country, freedom, and everything. And I don't think people realize if they're in support of the way these state governments have been behaving, they are throwing away something that people struggled for. I don't know when, like the Magna Carta, I think it was around 1,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like America was the ideas embodied in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and having the rule of law and consent of the governed. That's the culmination of 1,000+ year struggle of humans. And it's the realization of that. And yeah, there's flaws in the history that it wasn't equally applied to everyone. And in many areas, I think this country's been getting better. But when the state governments, what they've been doing, people supporting that out of fear, or even if they think it's science or it helps or whatever, they don't realize you're throwing away something that people, in the case of your ancestors, your parents, some people have crossed oceans on rafts, and 400 years ago they crossed oceans on boats, having wind blow them. People got on wagons and went out west with the threat of cholera and disease and wolves and who knows what, because for this liberty and freedom, and just to see everybody so willing to throw it away.
I think a couple of things in response to what you said. What people don't realize is that a lot of it tends to happen very incrementally. In places like Cuba, it did happen incrementally, but at a much faster pace than what we would see occur here. But it did happen pretty quickly over the span of 5-6 years. And it happened little by little. But once the big dominoes started to fall, that's when everyone down there realized that they had a problem. We haven't had anything significant like that here, like the federal government appropriating private property, things like that. But we are seeing some significant intrusions into our individual liberties by mostly state governments and a lot of the blue state governors, principally. But the other thing that people don't truly understand is that once you give away something to the government doesn't just freely give it back. It's going to take years to try and get that back. It's going to take perhaps the election of a more freedom-loving politician or leader to freely give that back, like I believe President Trump did in many instances, and other Republican presidents over time in our history. So it is disconcerting to see people in the name of safety or in the name of fear just fall in line with a lot of these measures and not work up the courage to challenge them, to dispute them. And I credit a lot of the individuals who have hired me and other attorneys to challenge these measures, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. And in situations like New Hampshire, where you have a Republican governor instituting a lot of these measures, many other Republicans are afraid to challenge a Republican leader. And it's a very small sect of individuals who have the courage to challenge this stuff. And like you mentioned, freedom is always under assault. In the instance where my parents left Cuba, my grandparents put my dad on a plane when he was 13 and sent him to Spain to live with relatives. And they didn't see him for 4 years. He then went from there to New Jersey. They saw him when he finally graduated from high school. I don't know if I have the courage to do that with my daughter now is 13. I don't know if I could live with myself not seeing her for 4 years. But they did that not knowing if they'd ever see him again, because they did not want him to grow up in the society that Cuba was becoming. They had mandatory conscription at age 15. So it's happening a little bit slower here, but you see some of the things happening here. My dad's told me that he has seen things happening here that he hasn't seen since his days when he was a child in Cuba. And that's scary to think about, because if we don't learn history, we're doomed to repeat its mistakes. So it's very important for people to be aware of what's going on and to apply a healthy degree of skepticism to and scrutiny to these measures.
Yeah, well, you're talking about courage and the few people in this state who've been even questioning things is the reason I reached out to you, because I saw, I think in at least 3 instances, you have come to defense of individuals or businesses. And I was wondering, did you reach out to them, or did they first reach out to you, the people that you've represented early on in this, going back to the summer?
Early on, the first lawsuit I filed, that was on behalf of a hair salon owner in New London, New Hampshire. We challenged the state of emergency declaration that the governor had declared. She had reached out to me, and then from that point forward, everyone has principally been reaching out to me. That's how it's supposed to work with attorneys. I can't solicit clients.
Okay.
They have been reaching out to me, every single one of them, and it's happened through word of mouth and other forms of communication.
Well, I can tell you that every time I've seen a news article about a business not complying or going to fight it or fine or anything, I've always messaged them and plugged your name because I saw that you represented that hair salon. So when the Color Cafe in New London is the case,
that's
there,
right.
When they reached out to you, or Mary, the owner, did, and you first get that, in your mind, do you start thinking about the repercussions of that? Like, because back then, especially more than now, it's at least online, I think less so in person, it's a very mob mentality, and nobody wants to tolerate any form of dissent, even questioning any aspect of these governor's orders that I don't think are based in science. They're just pulling them out of their butt. But so does it go through your mind like, okay, there could be this could be harmful for my business or my family or anything? Does that kind of stuff go through your mind, or you just take it, or what's the thought process like there?
Not at all. I don't think about that for a second. I certainly have received some significant backlash from representing these individuals and challenging these measures. I mean, I've had judges call me irresponsible. I've received death threats. I've had friends, acquaintances attack me, challenge me on social media, unfriend me on Facebook, God forbid. And, parents of my kids' friends challenge me, insult me, but it doesn't really have any impact on me. What's important to me is the work that I was undertaking and representing these clients. My duty is to the clients. And in Mary's instance, she was just furious that she was in the process of reopening her business. When we filed the lawsuit, that was right around the time when businesses like hers that were deemed non-essential were being allowed to reopen under very, very strict guidelines and capacity limits and so on and so forth. And she was just furious that she could not operate her business the way she wanted to operate, the way she had always operated it profitably for several years. And she just wanted to fight it and do everything she can to challenge it. So that not only did my duty to her obviously obligate me to represent her in a zealous fashion, but her passion for her business and for other people in her situation also incentivized me a great deal and energized me even further to undertake the work and not worry about all the other background noise.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. I think it's courageous, and I know I was pretty open-minded about all options with this virusing, and I, for the longest time, have not followed politics and news closely at all. But I do have interests in life that caused this to get on my radar, this coronavirus in China in December. So I followed it very closely. Mm-hmm. But by the time the first week of March came, I mean, it just, my radar's going off about, all right, this is looking like mass panic 101, government propaganda 101.
Right.
So then I found myself in a spot, I want to speak out against this, but what was wanting to prevent me from doing so is, what if I'm wrong? Then I'll look like an idiot down the road. Mm-hmm. And I decided, I got to put that fear away, because to me, this is classic mass panic. Most of this is propaganda. And I just spoke out constantly, March to this day. And for the first time in my social media presence online, I lost friends. I had people get upset at me. Mm-hmm. I mean, through everything that's gone on the last 10 years in that's crazy in this country, it's this issue that I've lost relationships over, because people just did not want to hear any other kind of dissent. And it's just, to me, it seems, if you believe in these measures, I mean, pick any issue, mask or not mask, lockdown, knockdown, you should support the other side being heard, for, in this case, it being heard in court and working out, because then if it goes in favor of these people and against you and your client, it would strengthen their case.
Right.
So to me, they're throwing out evidence-based inquiry, and the scientific method is all about competing ideas, butting heads, and you work that out.
Sure.
I guess we'll get into this then, because my goal here with this video or this interview is I want to have a tool to spread to as many business owners in New Hampshire as possible. We're starting to see late states start to clamp down. I think I read last night, down en masse. They're going to start limiting different things. California is severe, New York, other states. And Sununu, oftentimes, I'm going to despise what he does. It could be coming here again. And even if it's not, there are current measures in place. Like I said, the AG in the state is picking on these little businesses. So I want these businesses to know what some of the steps are, their rights are, and if we can't get it out in this interview, at least directions we can send them on who they can contact or where they can find out.
Sure.
So my first question that came to my mind was, I was in this little small business, I said, and overheard them say the police department kept calling them. If you're a small business owner and police department calls you saying they've receiving complaints and you have an officer on the other line, or they come in your business, how should a business owner respond to local police calling them or showing up?
Well, let's separate into two circumstances. A police officer or law enforcement official calls you. You're a small business owner, and they tell you that they've received a complaint that you're possibly not following the governor's guidelines for your particular industry in emergency order, God knows which one. There are 70 some at this point that the governor's issued. In the instance of a phone call, practically in any instance, business owners and individuals should always know and understand that you do not have an obligation to speak to law enforcement. You can always exercise your right to remain silent and not communicate anything to them. You don't have to volunteer anything to them. And this is advice that is usually dispensed in criminal situations. You're arrested or you're questioned by a police officer for some form of alleged conduct or some kind of criminal investigation. Police officers have a very effective way of extracting information from you by asking certain types of questions, like, we just want to hear your side of the story. Just tell us your side. We just want to know. We just want to get all the facts. We want to understand what happened. You have no obligation to speak to law enforcement ever. In the instance where you receive a phone call, you're a business owner, hey, we heard that we got a complaint, anonymous tip, your employees aren't wearing masks. Can you tell us what's going on? The only thing you need to respond with is say, you can ask where they got the information, police officer or law enforcement. In this case, it's usually a health department official. Liquor Commission investigators have actually recently been tasked with enforcing some of these measures by the AG's office. All you need to respond with is say, we're doing everything we can to comply with the guidelines. And I would just leave it at that. Any further questions, you can say, look, I'm not here to discuss my day. I have a busy business to run. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to refer you to an attorney. And that's it. And just repeat the same answer over and over again. If a police officer or health department official, or say if you're a restaurant or a bar, God forbid in these trying times, a nightclub, or a Liquor Commission investigator shows up, the Fourth Amendment prohibits what we all know as unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, it does not prohibit searches and seizures. It prohibits those searches and seizures that are unreasonable. In what are known as highly regulated industries, so bars, the alcohol industry, casinos, that's a highly regulated industry, restaurants because they sell liquor, and alcoholic beverages are considered part of those industries. For example, a Liquor Commission investigator or a health department official has more leeway to show up unannounced and enter your business. Unfortunately, that is the law. Courts have carved out what is called an administrative search exception to the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. They can, a government official can show up at your business and enter without a warrant if one of certain circumstances exist. One of those is usually if they receive a complaint that there is a violation of the law in your business. So typically what would happen, a bar, someone complains that they're serving alcohol to a minor. A liquor commission investigator can show up without a warrant and come in and question the owner, the bartenders, and find out and gather facts about that complaint. And if they determine that those facts meet the definition of a violation, they'll issue what's called a notice of administrative violation to that establishment. In these instances where you have many of these mitigation measures, such as businesses, their employees have to wear masks, there have to be certain tables have to be spaced 6 feet apart, all sorts of cleanliness procedures need to be implemented and applied. If a health department official or liquor commission investigator receives a complaint, they can actually show up without a warrant and enter the business. In that instance, again, you can employ the same thing, the same measure that I referenced earlier. You have no obligation to talk to them. They want to come in, look around, that's fine. I would not get into a situation where you're trying to prohibit them from entering, because what you don't want to do in that situation is expose yourself to any additional violations or backlash from the government. It's the same as when you get pulled over for speeding. Don't argue with the police officer. Don't create a show. Just take your lumps and move on. There's always an opportunity down the line to challenge anything that you think was done wrongfully, or if the police officer didn't follow the law in some manner. In this instance, if a law enforcement official enters your business, they can come in, let them do what they want. They cite you, they issue citation or fine you or what have you. There's always an opportunity to challenge that later on. So when you reference these small businesses getting fined, there are procedures and protections in place down the line to challenge those fines and to defend yourself. But as far as the point of contact, when they show up or contact you, just don't say anything. Let them come in, do their thing, and then take your lumps and move on. There's an opportunity down the line to challenge it.
So a lot of that response was focused on businesses that have a license through the
Right.
state.
Mm-hmm.
What if you are a business that you're not licensed through the state?
It depends on what kind of license it is. Many of these businesses do require licenses. Hair salon owners, you need to get a cosmetology license. Restaurant owners, you have business licenses, you have liquor licenses. Gyms, the owners have to have certain licenses, or there are requirements that they need to satisfy in order to operate those types of businesses. So there are always certain requirements that many of these businesses have to meet and carry with them and maintain current in order to operate them. So, and there's usually some administrative agency that is created by the state that governs or regulates your industry. Take a bakery, for instance, a gym, like I mentioned, really any other kind of business. There is some agency that regulates you. And pursuant to that regulation, a health department official could, in the instance of receiving a complaint, come in and enter without a warrant. Again, if that occurs, go with it. Don't challenge it at that point. Just keep what you're saying to a bare minimum, and then there is an opportunity to challenge it down the line. We can get into that if you ask me later on, or if the opportunity presents itself.
I found it interesting. You mentioned that if you have a liquor license, they're now sending someone from the liquor department or someone there. Is this not typically how it's done?
Typically,
Are they kind of
no.
overwhelmed, so now they're just recruiting other
Well,
people
I've
to do
I've
this?
actually dealt with this directly. I've dealt directly with the Liquor Commission on this, and in particular, with respect to one client that I have who has been targeted pretty directly by Liquor Commission in the past. And initially, when bars and restaurants were allowed to reopen, Liquor Commission investigators would continue with their normal visits to these establishments, but only to enforce the liquor laws. So, you can't overserve, you can't serve minors, have to maintain a current license, and if they receive complaints, they'd come in and investigate those, but complaints concerning liquor violations only. The Attorney General's office has now tasked the Liquor Commission with enforcing the governor's emergency orders, in particular the social distancing requirements, the mask wearing, and so on and so forth. So Liquor Commission investigators are now paying visits to restaurants and bars and nightclubs and looking for violations of the governor's emergency orders. And they have even been provided with the discretion to suspend an establishment's license on an emergency basis immediately if they find a violation of one of these measures. I had a direct dialogue with a Liquor Commission investigator concerning this, and he cited an obscure statute that I don't believe applies, and it's a statute that enables, again, the Liquor Commission to suspend your liquor license in the case where they find a violation that threatens the health and safety of the public. And I'm paraphrasing the statute right now, but I don't think it applies. I think it's an extreme situation when something like that should be done, but they have the authority to do that now. So that's normally not the Liquor Commission's role to enforce these types of orders issued by a governor. Their role is to enforce the liquor laws only, but they have now been tasked with this because I think the governor's office realized that a lot of these establishments were choosing either not to follow these measures or to employ them at a bare minimum because they have businesses to run. They don't want to, they're choosing between their livelihood and complying, and that's not feasible. So it's not normally Liquor Commission's role to do that, but they are doing that now, and businesses have to be on the lookout for that.
Okay, well, that's interesting because I read through all 9 of the fines, and the Attorney General, they do this little letter to the business, and something I noticed is in the first 3 or 4 of them, it was someone from the AG's office or the health department that went to this business. But then I got thinking, are they becoming overwhelmed with work and trying to outsource this to other people? Because in the last 5 orders they've done, it seems like they're recruiting the fire chief or the local police to go in there and do this work for them.
Well, the governor issued an emergency order about a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. Because initially, the emergency order that identified each of the industries that was allowed to reopen and on what guidelines applied to those industries, there is no real enforcement mechanism identified in that order. There is an enforcement mechanism in the statute, in the emergency powers statute, that enables a state to enforce any orders issued pursuant to those emergency powers. But again, it's very vague and amorphous. So the governor issued an emergency order when he learned that a lot of businesses were thumbing their noses at him. And in that emergency order, he tasked the state Attorney General's office and the Division of Public Health, which is the state-level administrative agency that governs public health guidelines in the state. He tasked those 2 offices with enforcing his mitigation measures. I believe they probably became overwhelmed. I'm speculating. And so they had to begin delegating some of that enforcement activity to local health departments. Now, there are only 2 cities or towns in New Hampshire that I believe have actual public health departments. That's Manchester and Nashua. So in Manchester, for instance, health department officials were visiting bars and restaurants and checking out what they were doing, if they were spacing tables appropriately, if they were, employees were wearing masks, and they were threatening a lot of these business owners with fines if they didn't comply. $500 fine for every violation, by the way. When that didn't work, I learned that the governor became pretty incensed when he saw one of those photos making its way around a particular bar in Manchester that was packed one night. And so I think they kind of started to go a little bit further. And I learned from this Liquor Commission investigator that they were then tasked with enforcing these measures. And so I do think that they were not prepared. The state was not prepared for the resistance that they were receiving from many small business owners in response to these measures, and they're now kind of making it up as they go in how to enforce this stuff. So now, as you see, they've now targeted a handful of businesses to try to make an example of them, and that's presented even additional complications because, and we can probably get into this. It's beyond the scope of your question, but they don't appear to have any process in place for adjudicating these fines. If you're fined, that's, again, you're innocent until proven guilty. You receive a speeding ticket. It's just an accusation at that point. You've been charged with it. You have the ability to defend it, and then not unless and until you are found guilty do you have to pay that fine, the speeding fine or whatever it is. In an instance where you receive a fine for not following a social distancing requirement, that's nothing more than an accusation. It's like anything else in our system of jurisprudence. Unless and until you were found guilty, do you have to pay that fine? And the state seems to have omitted or not even considered what kind of process they should have in place for that if a business owner chooses to defend himself or herself against such a fine.
A couple things in there. All right. It seems my hunch was that it would take very little pushback in New Hampshire for the state to be overwhelmed. But I find, personally, in my opinion, the pushback people have been getting in New Hampshire is pathetic, not existent. So even if it just doubled from what it is, the state, I don't think there's any way they can handle it. But it seems like what they're doing is just making things up as they go on the fly. And if that's the case, then if there are businesses or individuals that want to challenge this, there's probably a good chance for success, because it sounds like a lot of this is just making things up as they go on the fly. Some of these things are vague, not really sure where the legal, where they're getting legal justification for a lot of this. Like, are they even allowed to say, hey, we're going to have liquor commissioners go enforce this or that and then determine this fine, or police chiefs or fire chiefs or anything else, if they're just making all these things up?
Well, they are making it up as they go. I mean, that's what I'm observing. I'm obviously not in those offices figuring this out, but my observations, when I compare it to other processes that I'm familiar with, for example, in the criminal justice system or in the civil system, the process that they have here, they're coming up with is extremely vague and not very specific or helpful. So, for instance, when they're issuing these fines to local businesses, and you said there are 9 of them, right? I spoke with an attorney for one of those businesses, and he explained to me what the citation said and what he did. So it was obviously issued by the AG's office. He called and inquired as to whether his client could challenge the fine, how he or she could defend the fine if they chose to. The AG's office apparently told him they'd get back to him. Now, let me give you a helpful comparison. Again, I keep using this analogy, but if you pull over for speeding, the citation you receive from the officer contains a bunch of fine print.
Sure. And
a ton of information. It references statutes and processes. If you want to plead guilty, send it in with the payment. If you want to plead not guilty, send it in by this date. If you want to challenge this in court, you have to do this, 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 and this. There's just an array of procedures that you are informed of. That's the first step. You have to be informed of what your rights are. And then the rights themselves that you are informed of are extensive and very, very specific. And they're designed to protect you, because we all have due process rights. You cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. You can be deprived of life, liberty, property if you commit a crime and you're found guilty, but not without due process. You do have the ability to face your accuser, to challenge the way in which you have been charged, to challenge any procedures in place that have been used against you. You're allowed to submit evidence. You're allowed to confront witnesses, to call witnesses. You're allowed to confront your accuser, and so on and so forth. It is a vast, vast set of protections that are in place, and it's a wonderful system that we have, because this does not exist in other countries. So we need to make sure that we keep these in place. So with these fines that the state has been levying against these small businesses, in that instance with the attorney I spoke with, the AG's office told them they'd get back to him. And then they finally get back to him, and they say, well, they can have a hearing he said, well, where is the hearing going to take place? I'll get back to you. They finally follow up. They told him his client could have a hearing with the Department of Health and Human Services. And I presume that that's because the governor's emergency order that I mentioned earlier had tasked the Division of Public Health with enforcing these social distancing measures. And so I'm talking to him about this, and I told him, well, look, if you're going to have a hearing with DHHS, there's a procedure in place just like any other. If you file a lawsuit in court, or if you're charged with a crime, there's a vast array of procedural mechanisms. You get the ability to challenge the allegations. There's a discovery period. You get to exchange information with the other side. You get to depose witnesses. You get a hearing date. There are requirements for submitting lists of witnesses. I mean, there are no surprises in a process like that. So I told him, I said, look, if they told you that you have a hearing with DHHS, fine, every administrative agency has its own set of internal regulations, and those regulations, if that agency is tasked with being able to adjudicate any disputes, so Liquor Commission, they can cite you for liquor violation. You get that puts you into an administrative process where you get to exchange information, you get to depose witnesses, you have a full-blown trial in front of a Liquor Commission judge. It's not exactly it may not be the most fair forum, but you still get that. I told him, go look at DHHS's internal regulations and see if they have a set of procedures for adjudicative proceedings. If they don't have anything like that, and I took a cursory glance, and I'm not sure that they have something as robust as what I just identified in other instances. I think they have something that's a little bit more streamlined, but it's not really applicable to this situation. DHHS was never intended to be an enforcement agency for these types of orders. This was never intended to be like that. And I told him, if there's no such procedure like that, or if you think the one that they have is inadequate, I mean, you're looking at two specific due process violations right there. I mean, you don't have notice of your rights, and you don't have a due process. You don't have due process at all if you don't have a proceeding that adequately protects you and your due process rights from unfair allegations and the like. So I told him, take that, walk yourself into federal court, and file a complaint immediately, and try to get an injunction, because that simply doesn't sound like an adequate process. And I think that that's what the state is confronting now with these fines. They're issuing these fines thinking these business owners will just comply, pay it, and that'll set an example for other business owners that are not complying with the guidelines. But all you need is one person to challenge it, and that's going to just upends the system. And I think that's going to start exposing the weaknesses and flaws in what the state is doing with trying to enforce these measures in a space where they really haven't thought through how to do this.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because my personal opinion is just an average person that's not a lawyer or versed in law, is we're in a situation where the emperor has no clothes. And I'm the kid pointing out, these guys, the emperor has no clothes on. They have no way to enforce this stuff. And if businesses push back, I think if there was 1 dozen, 2 dozen businesses in this state that would say, we're going to fight back, we're not going to pay these fines, we want to exercise our rights, we're going to talk to attorneys and actually give pushback, then I think the fact that the emperor's wearing no clothes would be exposed, and we'd all know, and the charade would be up. And I think that's all it would take, is a couple dozen businesses in the state pushing back. And they don't have to be rude about it. Like you were saying earlier, if you're not going to talk to police on the phone or the investigators come in, you don't have to be rude. Get off my property, I have the rights, blah, blah. Just say, hey, respectfully, I got to talk to my attorney before I can talk to you, and just keep it simple.
Right.
And same thing, if the AG finds you $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is, they say on there, I've read their little editors' businesses, if you want to contest this, get a hold of us, we'll have a hearing.
Right.
And if we don't resolve it, then I'll go further.
Right.
Contact an attorney, fight this, because I believe that this would all go away. Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, challenging it with an attorney, obviously it costs money. But attorneys, me included, I've been very resourceful in working with clients on finding creative ways to fund these types of challenges. There's a Liberty Defense Fund that was started by Reopen NH to collect donations to then redirect to these types of legal challenges. So there are mechanisms in place that and resources that are available to challenge this stuff. But I agree with you. Legal challenges and litigation have a way of exposing flaws in the system, of making things more transparent, because we don't achieve that transparency just by relying on government officials. They're not going to provide us with the information that we want. We are on a need-to-know basis with them. And litigation, fortunately, has a way of exposing everything that we want to see, that we need to see in order to make more informed decisions.
Yeah, and I'd be curious how it plays out, and hopefully you with your clients or some other attorneys with their clients will get a day in court where actually judge doesn't dismiss it but actually hears it. Because you brought up the speeding tickets. You know, anyone who's gotten a warning or a traffic ticket, like you said, you read that and there's just all kinds of, they're pointing to statutes and due process. But with these orders, the Sheriff's Association of New York last month made a press release, and most counties in New York shared it to their Sheriff County Facebook page. Basically, he's telling the governor, we're not going to enforce these orders, but you don't know how. And I saw the other day, Riverside County, California, the sheriff there made a video, telling the governor of that state, we're not going to enforce these orders. They're not laws. We can't. Even if we wanted to enforce them, we don't. There's no statute to go to. We don't know how to enforce these. And I think it's the same situation in New Hampshire, and it would just take some, just not rolling over and paying these fines, some businesses or individuals on certain matters, if they would push back and fight, that it would expose that.
I agree with you. I like to see, sheriff's associations like that undertake that kind of effort. When I was referencing that one client that I was dealing with in connection with the Liquor Commission, we got on the phone with one of the investigators, and this is a client who has to. They're telling him, you got to put tables and chairs on your dance floor, and there's no dancing because apparently this is now Footloose. And the investigator, I'm on the phone with him. I said, look, if he has to follow all of these guidelines to a T, and follow your highly restrictive interpretations of those guidelines, because nowhere in the orders it say no dancing. If a group of individuals want to come in, sure, you can't commingle at the bar. You got to sit 6 feet apart in tables. But if they want to get up and go to a corner and dance, nothing in the order actually prohibits that expressly. But their interpretation is no, they can't do that either. So if bars, restaurants, nightclubs, any other kind of food service establishment or other businesses follow all of these orders to the T, I was telling him, I said, my client, he's going to have to just close his doors. He can't operate his business under this paradigm. And the investigator responded by telling me, look, I get it. I understand. I feel for you guys. Trust me. This is nothing personal. I said, it's nothing personal on our end either against you, and I hate that we're putting you in this position. He's like, I understand, but this is what we've been told to do, and we have to do this. So I think the more resistance occurs, the more you have instances like in New York with those sheriffs refusing to enforce them. It will take time. The more legal challenges that come up and that are raised, it takes time. Patience has to be applied here, a significant degree of patience. But over time, I think the trend will reverse. There are some courts in other states that have overturned and reversed some of these measures. In Pennsylvania, for instance, that federal judge happened in Michigan. So it takes time because a lot of these judges tend to be very hesitant about being the one that reversed something completely, and then they're blamed for an uptick in cases, God forbid. But it's people just need to have patience and we need to continue to do what we've been doing to oppose these measures.
When you're talking about you have to have these tables here, and I mean, some of this stuff is so ridiculous. It's almost getting down to you can have this amount of pepperoni on the pizza, but not green peppers. And I mean, it's just ridiculous how they're micromanaging businesses, how many people can go in there, not go in there. It got me thinking, I didn't even think of this till someone mentioned a podcast the other day. It's this church fighting the state of California's orders. Fifth Amendment with just compensation. I mean, you brought up in Cuba how they went after private property.
Right.
I mean, this is really, do you even own your property if someone's micromanaging and telling you what you can and can't do and driving your business into oblivion and making you go bankrupt?
That's an interesting point. The Fifth Amendment does prevent the government from taking your property without just compensation. So that normally applies to a situation where, say, you have a property that abuts a road and the government wants to come in and expand the road. In order to do that, they need to take a piece of your property and other properties, other neighboring properties that abut the road in order to be able to do that. And local governments do this all the time. It's normal. It's in there for a reason. They obviously can't do that without compensating you market value for the property. And if they don't do that, you can always sue them, but that protection is always there. There is such a notion as the government depriving you of the economic use of your property. The United States Supreme Court has held that that is a viable argument to make under the same provision, and both the United States Constitution and the New Hampshire Constitution contain provisions like that to prevent what are called takings. At some point, you will see, I've actually raised this argument in at least 2 of the cases that we filed. There will be instances where businesses sue our state government for forcing them to close because of these restrictions, either initially when they couldn't reopen, or down the line, as there was a story I read today where many restaurants in New Hampshire are choosing to close for the winter because their businesses has been slowed so thus far, and as a result of these restrictions, their winter season looks like it's going to be non-existent. So there will be instances where a lot of these businesses who have been forced to close sue the government and argue that many of these restrictions constituted a taking, which deprived them of the economic use of their property. And that's going to be interesting to see how those claims develop.
Yeah, I feel bad. I mean, there's one story, this lady, she said for 20-something years she worked 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. She might have been a single mom, too, to save up money. She finally got enough money after 2 decades and did her dream to buy a bed and breakfast here in rural New Hampshire. And I think she closed on the property last fall, maybe early in the winter, and then all this happens. And I'm like, and these people who are just so flippantly, shut everything down and stay at home. I'm like, this is not a small matter. You're destroying people's lives and livelihoods and crushing their dreams and aspirations that they worked for and sending people into depression and suicide and maybe alcoholism or drug abuse. It's not good. And this inspector that, he said, well, I don't want to. It's like, well, what we learned from World War II, a big thing we learned through the Nuremberg trials afterwards is just following orders is no excuse.
Right.
And if any of you government officials are tuning into this for some reason, I challenge you, please, that's no excuse that you're just following orders. If you think it's wrong, then don't do it. It's just an embarrassment and sad that in the live free or die state of New Hampshire, no sheriff is speaking out, no cops are speaking out, and some of these other states that are draconian compared to New Hampshire, like California, I've seen cops speak out, sheriffs speak out. In Seattle, Washington, a police officer got fired for speaking out. I'm like, how is this happening all over the country? How are courts and judges in Michigan and Pennsylvania doing the right thing, but not in New Hampshire? And it's an embarrassment, given the rich history of this state and the supposed love for freedom, that government officials are just going along with this, whether you're a liquor store investigator or the fire department who hassled the local business I was talking about that I was in. And I wish they would just stop and get on the side of the people, because if you're a fireman, you go from being a hero when you stop saving people from burning homes to oppressing them and start being a tool of oppression to run their livelihood and destroy their dream that they've spent decades building. And it's just sad.
It is. The left tends to target business as some kind of evil empire at times, but 99% of businesses in this country are small businesses. I mean, businesses run by 1 or 2 people, and these people aren't pulling in millions of dollars. I mean, they're pulling in 5-figure, low 6-figure incomes, and that is not a lot by today's standards. They have a lot of expenses, and when they're forced to close, whether temporarily or permanently, they're losing their livelihoods. They are losing their life savings. Everything something they have spent decades working on just vanishes just like that because of a misguided government order. And it's sad. It's depressing to see that, especially when you see other states that are doing it correctly. You mentioned other states like Texas and so on. I think Florida has been a great example of how to deal with this so-called pandemic in a more effective way. And it happened early on. Governor Ron DeSantis down there, he's actually my roommate from law school. So I've applauded him extensively throughout all this. But he noticed he did something that a lot of these other governors, in particular Governor Sununu, didn't do early on. He looked at the data and he looked at what was going on in Italy. Very early on in February, you knew what this virus was capable of doing. And in particular, you knew that it selectively targeted the elderly portions of the population and the immunocompromised. In Italy, I mean, we saw the deaths were just rampant there because you had, young people, young folks getting together with their elderly family members, and then the virus just spread rampantly. And of course, it's lethal for elderly people. So he recognized that right away. He was one of the last governors to close down the state, and he did so, but very briefly, and he's one of the first to begin reopening it. But the other thing he did there was he not only quarantined nursing homes and long-term care facilities, but he identified, he ordered that if in one of those facilities there was a COVID positive case, you took that person and got him out of there and put him in a COVID-only facility. And that way, it reduced the spread of the virus to other elderly people in those facilities. I think at one point, only 40% of the COVID deaths in Florida were attributed to facilities like that in Florida. By comparison, in New Hampshire, about 80% of the COVID deaths are in nursing homes and LTC facilities. Because Sununu didn't go as far as DeSantis did. They were quarantining for those facilities, so nobody in or out, but they weren't going any step further. In states like New York, Cuomo was shipping people off to nursing homes and LTC facilities. So all it required is just looking at the information and then developing measures that were directly tied to that data. For whatever reason, we're not doing that here, and it boggles my mind how you can have two very competent leaders looking at the same information, or maybe they're not, and coming up with drastically different solutions. DeSantis is crushing it down there. He's trying to get schools reopened permanently. He's reopened everything. He's requiring, for example, in Miami-Dade County and other counties that are still enforcing very restrictive measures, he's requiring them to produce data to him that justifies those measures. So it's depressing to see leaders like that being so effective in the face of this pandemic, and people like Sununu are just going in the opposite direction when the data is the same and it's available to everybody. And by the way, the numbers in New Hampshire are anemic compared to Florida.
Yeah, I actually was on the New Hampshire Health Department's website last night, maybe early this morning, and like you said, 80% are from the long-term care facilities, but I think we're up to 500 something supposed COVID deaths right now. I pulled up flu numbers from the past. Flu's disappeared in New Hampshire now.
Oh, flu cases are at an all-time low, right?
Yeah, for some reason there's no flu right now.
Right.
I don't know where that went.
Yeah.
But if you look at previous flu years, it was much greater than the COVID numbers in New Hampshire right now. So
what I discovered early on, and I raised this fact in all the cases that we were filing, was that if you knew what the virus did, you know how it selectively impacts only a very specific portion of the population, the elderly. The Department of Health and Human Services, under its internal regulations, which I read, has always had quarantine authority with respect to communicable diseases. And this virus falls within what's defined as a communicable disease under its internal regulations. So that means if they found somebody who is diagnosed with a communicable disease in one of these facilities, they can go and quarantine that individual against their will, quarantine them away from the rest of the facility population in order to protect the spread of the virus or that disease to anyone else. DHHS has always had that authority. That is all we had to do in this state and many other states. But in New Hampshire, that's all we had to do. All he had to do was go to the DHHS and say, let's stop the spread of this virus in these facilities and we'll contain it just like that. Everyone else should be allowed to live their lives And once we all achieve herd immunity, we'll be incapable of transmitting the virus to anyone who is more susceptible to dying from it. We never needed any top-down, broad emergency orders issued pursuant to the governor's emergency powers to combat this virus. All we had to do was have DHHS implement that authority and protect those people in that manner. But for whatever reason, the governor deemed that was not sufficient. We had to issue 70-some emergency orders, legislating a vast array of our society. So it's very unfortunate that it's come to this.
Yeah, I agree. And there's other governors too. Bill Lee in Tennessee's doing a good job. I'm licensed down there. The Kristi Noem from South Dakota.
She's been fantastic.
Yeah, and when you look at the numbers of all these different states, it's not like California right now is doing horrible, and they've been basically locked down since March.
Right. If these lockdowns worked, why are things getting worse?
Sure.
And in New Hampshire, if you look at the numbers, part of the hysteria is everyone's looking at the uptick in cases. Well, of course, there's going to be an uptick in cases. People are out and about interacting, and you develop symptoms. You go get tested, or you think you may have been exposed to somebody, so you go get tested. So we've had a surge in testing. We're doing 10,000 tests per day. Back in April, May, we're doing 1,000, not even. So obviously, more testing is going to equal more new cases. But if you normalize the rate of new cases per day to the number of tests per day, it's anemic. The number of new cases per day is roughly the same as it was back in April when we weren't testing anywhere near as much as we are now. And then, new cases do not equal new deaths. The rate of hospitalizations and the rate of deaths in the state have been the same for months. So we should not be looking at new cases. We should be looking at deaths. The deaths start upticking, then there's something to worry about.
Sure.
But otherwise, new cases is a fairly irrelevant phenomenon.
Okay, let's get back to some things that businesses do. We went over earlier if police call, and you said if you're licensed.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the camel's nose under the tent. The government can come in and has broad leeway. Supposedly, they are able to get away with it, getting all of your property. But that business I was in, he said the health inspector called them. What should a business do if the health inspector calls you? Hey, we have an anonymous tip. Someone snitched on you. How should a business owner handle that if it's the attorney general or the health department calling them?
I mean, I would first ask, well, where'd you get the tip from? Obviously, they likely will not tell you.
Yeah.
And then the only thing I would say is I would advise business owners to say in that instance is we're doing everything we can to comply with the guidelines. If you need any other information, I can give you my attorney's name and number, or I'll get that information and get back to you.
Okay.
And my attorney will give you all the information that you need.
Sure. Have you ever come across this video? I think it's called Never Talk to Police or Don't Talk to Police. It's been on YouTube for 10 years. This professor at Regent School of Law University did it. Then you had a cop come on afterwards. Did you ever see that video by chance?
I haven't seen it. I mean, I'm probably familiar with some of it.
Everybody should watch that. It has 10 million views on YouTube. But it seems like, what lawyers tell you that when they plead the fifth, I think like the business owner I was talking to, I don't want to make them mad, let them in here. By just talking to them, you're giving them more rope to hang you with.
Well, the reason a police officer or health department official or any other kind of law enforcement official, the reason they ask questions is because they don't have evidence.
Sure.
So don't give them any. And you're not doing anything wrong by not giving them any evidence. You have no obligation to talk to them. And you can be polite about it. They might get upset. That's fine. Just be patient. It'll pass. And if whatever happens after that, you'll have the ability to defend yourself and challenge it. But if they ask questions, you can always respond with, listen, I'm not here to discuss my business. I got to get back to running my business. It's a really busy day. I'm jammed, this and that. If you need any information, I can get you my attorney's number, and you can contact him or her, and they'll give you all the information you need. And you repeat that 15 times if you have to, because you're not obligated to give them any other information voluntarily.
Yeah, because an anonymous tip may or may not be true, but it's
you can
really
always
not evidence. But if they're going to come and investigate this anonymous tip, well, now they're collecting evidence that you might be giving them.
Correct. And if they show up, obviously they can come in without a warrant in that instance. You will have the opportunity down the line, if you're charged with a violation, to request that information, to request information on who gave them that tip and how viable or how credible that was. So you will have the opportunity to get that if you are charged, because again, pursuant to whatever process they hopefully have in place to adjudicate this, you'll have the ability to obtain what's called discovery. In any criminal case, if you're charged with a crime, the prosecutor is supposed to give you all this information that's required under the law, including stuff like that. So in this instance, you'll have the ability to get this information. You may not get it then, and that's fine. Just take your lumps and you move on, and then you'll have the ability to challenge it later on. But by no means should you voluntarily offer them any information, because the more information you give them, the more opportunities you give them to expose yourself to an allegation of a violation or something related to that.
So there's this gym down in New Jersey. They've been fighting down there, Attila's gym, forever. And he made a video the other day telling everybody, put up a sign in front of your business basically saying, if you're a government agent in any official capacity, you're not allowed on my property without a warrant. Do you think stuff like that is helpful or not helpful for businesses to put up?
I do agree with the notion that if they don't have a warrant, they don't have a complaint, and if there are no other circumstances that require them to go in there. So if they're not, for example, let me backtrack. In the Liquor Commission scenario, right? Liquor Commission investigators can come in without a warrant in 3 or 4 instances. If they have a complaint, if they're walking by and they see something happening in plain view, like somebody stumbling around inside your bar, or if they're coming in and they want to check your license, that's all they can do. Usually outside of those circumstances, they can't come in without a warrant. And I've had a federal judge agree with me on that point. If they don't have a warrant, and if none of these circumstances exist that bring in what I call the administrative search exception to the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, if none of those circumstances exist and no warrant exists, they can't come into your property. It is private property, and they're not allowed in there. Putting up a sign like that, that's fine, but I would certainly be prudent in how you deal with an official who shows up for some reason. Depending on what they tell you about why they're there. Again, don't make a scene and don't get yourself into a situation where you may expose yourself to additional violations. But again, if they have no warrant, if they're just there, they just show up, I just want to come in and check things out. You're not going to let a police officer in your house to see if you're committing a crime. They can't do that. And that same concept applies here. But be very careful about why they're there and make sure you understand why they're there, because you don't want to create any more problems for yourself than you want to have.
Sure, and I think, to my knowledge, I don't know of a single person in this country who's been ticketed, fined, arrested for not wearing a mask.
Right.
Usually, you cause an altercation or a scene, then they're going to get you for trespassing for not leaving, or disturbing the peace, or assault on a police officer. So, yeah, I think it is important that people, fight, stand up for your rights, but do it in a way that's respectful, and don't, get into these big arguments, and especially physical or anything like that. But you can still stand up for your rights in a respectful manner.
Right. Well, the governor's order, for example, the statewide mask mandate, there's some language in there that suggests that it's more of a guidance mechanism than an actual mandate. Frankly, it's not clear. It's pretty vague. But I agree with you. I haven't seen any instance in which someone hasn't been arrested for not wearing a mask. If and when that happens, I think that's another milestone that we're going to reach along that spectrum that I was referencing earlier about how things happen incrementally. We've gotten to certain milestones that I thought we never get to, like fining business owners for not following these guidelines. But I wouldn't be surprised if that starts to happen too.
So similar to tying in the mask thing and
Sure.
my question about the sign, there is one business in New Hampshire that put up a sign, we're not going to make anyone, employees or customers, wear masks. Please refer to the U.S. Constitution. And that's basically thumb in the eye at
Sure.
the state, right? So what if, and I appreciate and actually think in the state we do need that kind of civil disobedience where a business is going to cause a scene and be blatant about it and fight that fight. But I think it's probably most businesses would want to do it in a respectful and take the legal route. But instead of having a sign up like that, we refer to the U.S. Constitution, we're not going to make anyone wear a mask. Well, most of these mask orders have exceptions. So can a business just put up a sign that says the city of Nashua or the governor's orders is requesting everybody wear a mask? If you're not wearing one, we'll assume you have a condition that prevents you from doing so. And then it's kind of like a wink, wink, nod, nod,
right.
but you're not.
Well, the ordinances,
being
the
blatant about it.
towns and cities that have passed these ordinances requiring that individuals wear masks and the governor's mask mandate all contain exceptions for wearing masks. I mean, the governor's mask mandate in particular has something like 9 exceptions. It's ridiculous. There's so many different loopholes. So in that instance, I don't see anything wrong with taking that approach. The law does not, none of those laws actually addresses that specific instance, but it does provide an exception for medical reasons, and I don't see any problem with the business taking that approach, any legal problem with the business taking that approach. I think that would be a very defensible position to take.
Yeah, because I know for a fact businesses are, a lot of people don't want to social distance, they don't want to wear masks, and there are still places in New Hampshire where they're not complying with this.
Yep.
And when I'm in there, everybody's having fun, it's a good time, the place is full. So there are people avoiding businesses where all this nonsense is being enforced. So it seems like a way a business could kind of let people know, hey, we're not going to make you wear one in here. But the way the sign is up, it's not thumbing the nose enough in the eye of the state where the state can't use it as evidence against them.
Right. I think, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach. I think another approach businesses can take to give off the appearance that they're trying the best that they can without outright forcing all of their patrons to abide by this ridiculous nonsense. Is put up signs that say, please maintain a safe social distance. And other things like that, having hand sanitizer stations, having a box with masks out front, and putting up a sign that please wear a mask, unless you have a medical reason for not doing so. I've advised clients to do that, and that way, if you get that call from the health inspector, or someone shows up, you say, look, I'm trying, I'm doing the best I can, but you as a business owner cannot station yourself in every single area in your business and make sure people are social distancing. Make sure that their chairs and tables are 6 feet apart. Make sure that they're sanitizing their hands and so on and so forth. You cannot physically do that. It is simply not logistically possible for you to employ that kind of oversight over your business. So the next best thing, in my opinion, because you want to keep your business open, right? In order to continue operating your business without having the health department or the AG's office breathing down your neck, is to employ those types of measures and try and put all of these markers in place, I guess, and simply say, we're trying our best, and we'll continue to do so, but you cannot expect me to police every single person that comes in here.
Well, that will move us into what time you got to get out of here?
I'm good.
Are you good still right now?
Yeah.
Okay. We got most of it out of the way. So that moves us into actually the Nashua. I read their mask ordinance, and they're basically conscripting business owners and making them unpaid agents, law enforcement officers. I mean, it's telling you if someone's in your business without a mask, you have to get them out of there. Not only that, since we have an exception, now you're making me an unpaid investigator. I first have to see, do these guys have an exception? If they don't have an exception to your ordinance, now you're making me an unpaid law enforcement officer where I have to enforce this ordinance. Is that even legal?
In my opinion, no. Well, let me preface that by saying all of these measures, the ordinances, the governor's emergency orders, they are the law. So if you don't follow it, I mean, you can be cited for violating it. I do not agree that these measures are legal, however. Unfortunately, they need to be challenged in court, and that's how you resolve that kind of issue. But a city like Nashua, really any municipality in the state, does not have the authority, the statutory authority, to issue those types of requirements. One of the allegations in the Nashua mask case that we filed is that there's a set of statutes in New Hampshire that they're called They provide cities and towns with the authority to enact whatever laws that they want to enact. Those are usually called ordinances. Those statutes provide very specific areas in which these cities and towns can enact ordinances. They're very specific. You can enact ordinances that deal with the plumbing in your city. You can enact ordinances that deal with certain types of, the streets, signs, things like that. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has held that if those statutes do not give a city or town the specific authority to enact a certain type of ordinance, that ordinance is invalid on its face. There is no provision in any of those statutes that gives a city or town in New Hampshire the authority to issue a mask mandate of any kind. Nothing whatsoever. The Nashua lawsuit that we filed remains pending. We'll have a trial date later next year at some point. But with respect to the provision that you're referencing, no, the city of Nashua does not have the authority to issue that kind of a requirement of business owners.
Yeah, I agree. And, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, it's not. It might be an order or law, but it's not legal because I've seen firsthand that in these towns like Plymouth or Nashua, when
Keene is another one.
Yeah, when an individual walks into a place without a mask, in the presence of an officer, police officer, nothing has happened. So
I've done it too. I went to the liquor store the other day, and there's an officer stationed there. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, so they just had an officer there, I guess, to regulate the flow because they were pretty busy. And I walked in without a mask. He didn't do anything. The store manager asked me to wear one, so I chose at that point whether or not to do so. But the officer didn't do anything. A lot of these law enforcement officials have the same view that you and I do. They're just, they're doing their jobs, so they're in a very tough position, but a lot of them feel the same way that we do, privately, of course.
Yeah, well, they're in a tough situation right now, and me going back to earlier, my little rant against the investigator and the firemen and everyone else is, okay, right now, a large segment of the population is not happy with police officers, want to defund the police, see all the police brutality videos, this and that. Well, you have another segment of the population who's sees law enforcement in a favorable light. Well, those people, that's who these firemen and the police are coming after and oppressing. When the health department or the attorney general sends you in to talk to the small business owner, this is that group of people who tend to be more favorable view of the law enforcement, the firemen. So it's like, if you want to make everybody in society not like you, well, then enforce these pandemic and lockdown orders and face mask orders is a good way to do that. So that'd be my message for all you guys to think about if you are a police officer or fireman.
I think in terms of for business owners, I think what they need to remember is that at the low-level enforcement officials, like law enforcement, policemen, health inspectors, they're really not the enemy. They've been tasked with enforcing this stuff, and a lot of them don't agree with it. It's the leaders at the top that they need to direct their animosity towards and their disagreement towards.
This country is descending into becoming more chaotic, and I think people are losing trust in institutions, and I just think by enforcing these lockdown orders, mask mandates, everything else, it's just going to cause more and more people to distrust even more institutions or government agencies than did before, and it's not helping the situation.
No, not at all.
It's making it a lot worse. Finishing up on can the city of Nashua or the state eventually, I don't know if the governor will ever do something similar, basically conscript business owners and make them unpaid law enforcement officers. The Broken Spoke Saloon up in Meredith or Laconia, they closed down for Bike Week, which is probably when they make most of their money all year. That type of business is catered to that crowd because the week before Sununu did the 100 people or more, whatever. But in their statement on their Facebook page, they said, we are closing even though this is very painful for us and is going to hurt our business because I can't have my 105-pound waitress be a law enforcement officer and go up to 200-pound bikers and tell them to put on a face mask.
No, especially when they're partaking in the festivities.
Yeah.
That's not a good situation to have. Right. Like I said, cities and towns do not have the authority to implement that kind of requirement. They don't have the authority to issue a mask mandate at all. I believe they're all illegal, and even at the governor's level, those mask mandates that he has issued, including the most recent statewide mask mandate, I think those are also unconstitutional. But at the lower level, these towns and cities simply do not have the statutory authority to issue those types of requirements.
On the face mask issue, as far as a business owner, there's one business particular that made the news, Rosalind's Homemade Ice Cream. Someone anonymously called 1-800-I'm-a-Nazi on them, snitched on them that they weren't that none of the employees are wearing face masks. Health department or whoever shows up, and the owner says, hey, I'm not going to make them wear a mask, and publicly said we're going to close our business instead. So I'm wondering, there's exceptions to all these face mask orders, like I said. So I could see him taking that approach as a protest. We're closing down, but other businesses could maybe not talk to them or say, well, hey, these orders have exceptions. Then isn't it incumbent on the state to prove the employees of Rosalind Homemade Ice Cream or anywhere else don't have exceptions to those face mask orders?
Well, the burden is always on the state in accusing you of a crime. The burden is always on them to prove that charge is true. If you have defenses to a certain charge or an allegation, however, you do need to prove that allegation. So if you do have a medical reason for it, for not being able to wear a mask, then you should be prepared to substantiate that. It's not that difficult to get a doctor's note saying that you shouldn't wear a mask. Every time I put one on, and just to be clear, I mean, whenever I go, I don't take things to an extreme. If I need to go shopping with my daughters at Hollister and they want clothes, I'm not going to deprive them of getting them the stuff that they want or need because I'm being told to wear a mask when I go in there. I'll put one on for 2 minutes and go do what I have to do. You know, when my girlfriend and I go into a restaurant, and I've done this a lot in Massachusetts recently, if they ask me to wear a mask, I'll put one on between the 5 seconds it takes me to walk in and sit down. I'm not going to destroy the experience just because someone's telling me to wear a mask. That being said, it can't be that difficult to get a doctor's note. Every time I've worn a mask for a significant period of time, and I've had to do this when I've gone to court twice, I'm out of breath very quickly. And I know doctors wear them for hours and hours during surgery, but it doesn't work for me. I'm sure I can get a doctor's note if I wanted to, citing some reason for not being able to wear a mask. So it shouldn't be that difficult to substantiate a defense like that, to prove that you fall within one of the exceptions to a mandate like that. But generally, the state has the burden to prove the accusation. If you have defenses, we have to prove those. Leading up to that, not speaking to law enforcement, not volunteering information, again, deprives them of information that they might need to prove their case.
Sure.
So that's why it's also effective never to just voluntarily communicate with law enforcement when you're being accused of a violation like that.
So is in regards to an individual, let's say the state of New Hampshire or any jurisdiction actually starts enforcing face masks, for example, but it could be another issue, and you plead the fifth and remain silent, they don't have to prove you don't have an exception?
Well, they need to prove you weren't wearing a mask.
And
Okay.
then you would have
So
to prove
that
you
Go ahead, I'm
didn't
sorry.
have to?
Correct. And again, that's pretty easy to do. Then it shifts back to them generally. So I mean, these mandates have not been tested like that yet. Like, you have not had an individual cited for not wearing a mask and either been fined or what have you. But generally, the way it works, that's the way it would work.
Okay.
Once you produce documentation that you had a medical reason for not wearing a mask, then it's incumbent on the state now to attack that and challenge that and pick it apart and find a way to undermine it. I can't imagine lawyers who are prosecuting criminal cases would want to be dealing with stuff like that. That's probably the last thing that they thought they'd go to law school for. So, but that's normally the way it would work.
All right. couple more questions. Sixth Amendment, the U.S. Constitution, Article 15, New Hampshire Bill of Rights, basically says you have a right to face an accuser, and I find this troubling right now. It seems like every business who's been fined so far it starts out with these anonymous accusers, and I'm just wondering how right to face an accuser and anonymous snitching seems to be the basis, at least gets the ball rolling on these investigations.
Well, it's unfortunate that these measures have created this environment where people are snitching on other people. It's so unnecessary, but that protection that you identified falls into the various due process protections that exist in the Constitution and that we are all afforded when we're ever accused of a crime. One of them being the right to face your accuser. In any situation like that, in a proceeding like that, you would have the ability to find out where this complaint originated from. And I certainly, if I'm the lawyer representing the accused, I'm asking for that information. I'm going to do everything I can to get it. So you do have the ability to confront where this complaint came from, where it originated from, who concocted it, why, where did they get that information, and so on and so forth. So that protection remains in place in these situations where businesses are being fined.
Yeah, because this whole... All right, you said these laws are vague, and they seem vague. They, to me, seem completely arbitrary. The way they're enforced seem arbitrary, and I'm wondering why they're being bullies and picking on small local New Hampshire businesses. They're not going after big corporations. But you know, if a police officer drives by and sees someone raping someone on the side of the road, they're going to intervene 100% of the time.
Right.
Or a fight, intervene 100% of the time.
Sure.
But this just seems, it's
creating an equal protection problem potentially when they're singling out certain businesses and enforcing these measures against them, but they haven't done so until now. They've been issuing warnings here and there. They're choosing which businesses to go into, and now all of a sudden they've fined 9 businesses. There's definitely an equal protection argument to be made there, depending on how it was enforced, what types of industries they targeted versus the industries they left alone. So that's another potential constitutional problem that this raises.
I just don't know why people want to live in a society where the basis of who's getting in trouble and who's not is anonymous snitching. It's like that Saddam Hussein's Iraq or Kim Jong-il's North Korea, you know, or Stalin's Russia, where we have a bunch of anonymous snitchers is what gets the ball rolling on who gets in trouble and who does not. Because when I go around, many businesses in New Hampshire are not complying with this. A lot of them, even if they want to, they're not. So it's like, okay, who's getting in trouble and who's not? Well, it's all starting with anonymous snitch, or it's arbitrarily enforced who's getting in trouble and who's not. And it looks like the big, mean state bullies picking on the weak. They're not picking strong businesses to go after.
Right. I mean, these businesses are suffering enough as it is in trying to comply with these various guidelines. It's burdensome enough as it is. The last thing they need is a bunch of Karens running around snitching on them and bringing, the weight of the government, the authority of the government to their doorstep. It's very, very frustrating because this environment it's killing small businesses. It's killing the restaurant and service industry, the food services industry. The last thing they need is just people outing them in ways that I never thought would happen in this country. That's the kind of stuff that you would see, Nazi Germany and Cuba, Soviet era, Russia, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and what got me, this business I was in, when he told me, someone anonymously snitched on me to the New Hampshire Health Department, we had a conversation, and in the course of that conversation with him, I said, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if there's people snitching on their competitors. And he's like, it's funny you say that, because the person I think who did it used to own a business like mine, and I heard he wants to open another one next year similar to mine. So I think your advice on if someone does report you, when you speak to your attorney, find out who that was, because I would not be surprised if people are being vindictive and going after people or whatever the motive is. Yeah,
early on during the lockdowns when everything was shut down, I have a client, it's a tattoo shop here in Manchester, and one of his competitors, he was servicing people in his home, according to the state agency that regulates his business, they believe that that was not allowed. They sent him a nasty letter. They asked him to identify how many days he'd been doing that, how many clients he had seen, and so on. Look, basically, they were asking for information so that they could use it and charge him with violations. So he came to me. I sent him a letter. I told him very politely to go fly a kite, and but it was an anonymous tip from, and he had every reason to believe it was one of his competitors, and that's, it's frustrating when that happens. I think down the line, if more of that continues to happen, a lot of these complaints tend to be either unjustified or baseless or false. Businesses do have measures they can take against people like that. I mean, there's defamation claims that they could pursue in civil court. That also raises an instance where there's perhaps an unfair and deceptive business practice that's being employed by a competitor. There's a statute that regulates that kind of conduct in New Hampshire. So businesses can pursue that kind of those types of remedies if an individual's conduct in tattletaling on them essentially has affected their business in a negative way. That's always a possibility that they can pursue if they choose to.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I had for you. Do you have anything else you want to add? If there's individuals or businesses in New Hampshire who want to help put an end to this nonsense through the legal route or standing up for their rights, think anything we need to add?
I can't think of anything else to add. Thank you for having me. It was I enjoy having these types of conversations. I think people need to be more informed about what's going on and what they can do. I'm always happy to chat with business owners about how to navigate this difficult environment and the ways that they can challenge some of these measures. It's not only a part of my practice, but I'm very passionate about it because my views are very closely aligned with the opposition to this stuff. It's very unfortunate, and I hope that it ends soon.
So if there's an individual or a business out there, if you guys get fined, the health department comes poking around, or anyone else, if you want to speak to an attorney, get a hold of Robert Foho, how do they find you? Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay.
They can contact me, my website, foholaw.com, or by email or phone. My phone is 603-473-4694. They can just give me a call or email me at rfoho@foholaw.com, and I'm always happy to chat and see if there's something that we can do. All
right. I did look around on your website a little bit, watched a couple of videos, and one of them was talking about flat rates for... I have ways of being creative. Okay.
to help people because a lot of these businesses are owned by one or two people.
Sure.
They don't have the resources to fight this stuff on a grand scale. So I've been very creative and flexible with fee arrangements for these types of cases.
Okay. So if a business is contacted or getting in trouble and you talk to you, they could at least probably have a ballpark idea of what a cost would be if they're going to pursue this.
Yeah, I always do that.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your time, and
thank you.
Hopefully you get some time before a judge, get some evidence presented, at least a hearing on the evidence and the case and the facts, and have it go somewhere. So.
It's a process. The first case we filed is actually on appeal to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, the State of Emergency Declaration. So that'll be heard hopefully soon. But yeah, a lot of this stuff will come to fruition, and there will be some rulings on the merits of these challenges.
Awesome. All right, thanks a lot.